Hi there. You know how I keep talking about the importance of being able to communicate your transferable skills to different audiences and of taking ownership of your career narrative. Well, this coming 6th, 7th, and 11th of March, I will be joining other PhD career experts including Ashley Ruba, Ali Devan, David Giltner, and Gertrude Nontra on the PhD Pathways Online Summit, where we'll be sharing our insights on the different facets of approaching the job market as a PhD. And I'll have a surprise for participants, so I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Register now at papaphd.com/summit.
The PhD is an adventure, an odyssey into knowledge for which you must prepare. If you want tips, news, and a little humor about the PhD and about career readiness, that's what I bring you here on the PhD Dojo. Here you'll find everything to be a black belt at the PhD and beyond. Welcome to the Dojo.
We've decided with David to do a reverse interview. From this topic, I do know anything about it, and I have a lot of questions for David. I think he's more knowledgeable than me, so we'll go from that. So it's Papa PhD and Second Lab PhD Dojo. I'm sure you know what is Beyond the Scissors with Papa PhD because this is your audience, David. And what's the Second Lab? So the Second Lab is a non-for-profit organization. We are based in Quebec, in the Quebec province, but we are working with student research centers, research organization everywhere in Canada, but mostly in the Quebec province these days. But we are based everywhere in Canada online. And what are we doing? We empower early career scientists for their career and to have an impactful, positive impact for the society. This is our mission. But basically, we help them to get the jobs. So we are delivering programs, workshops, mentorship, entrepreneurship, and it's growing up. So we are very happy for that.
I think it's good to reintroduce the Second Lab. You have a great program of helping young researchers, be it PhD, master's, postdoc. I have met some of them. I'm in your mentorship program too, which is great to be giving back to the community through that. Well, you're gonna ask something?
Yeah, let's go on the topic.
Yeah, the topic, cognitive dissonance. Maybe people now are feeling cognitive dissonance about what's happening with the show, but it's the first one of 2024. But yes, cognitive dissonance. When you proposed that subject to me, I found it very interesting because there is one angle to cognitive dissonance that's really interesting to me in this context of being in academia, thinking about your career, thinking about your future, your professional future. And I think, and I'm fairly sure from all the conversations that I've had and all the students that I've crossed, that there is a lot of distress and anxiety about your professional future. And I propose that a lot of it comes from some aspect of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. So, David, can you define what is cognitive dissonance?
Well, an example that I've heard recently is, for example, meet someone who, let's say, says that they're vegan, right? And you know them for a while, and then you meet them at a restaurant, and they're eating, a big meat burger. And in that moment, in your brain, there's a conflict between what you know, what you believe, and what reality is throwing at you, and that throws us off balance. Of course, it's also part of living and learning. Some cognitive dissonance is what makes us understand new things, create new routines, reshape our reality tunnel, let's call it like that. But when it's above a certain level and when it's chronic, in a certain context, and the one that interests us here is your career, minding your career project, your life project on the professional side when you are in grad school and when you are in academia. Well, it can become a hindrance, it can become unhealthy.
Yeah, I heard another example, like the people who think that we are in environmental crisis, like we all thinking about it, and it's pretty frightening. But I'm taking my car every day, so and I'm not the only one. People buy very big cars, they take the plane, continue to take a plane, but still very sensitive about the environmental crisis. So and they rethink about it, like, well, I'm not the only one to do that. Um, there's still,
And
yeah.
that's the accommodation. You can accommodate to some cognitive dissonance that you live with, for sure. We're all human, and it's I think a reality for all of us. But some of them can really throw you off balance and be deleterious to you in a way.
So finally, to be in the academic setup, and specifically for PhD, how do you see the cognitive resonance there?
So
Dissonance
the
there.
dissonance, yes. What I see, and what I'd like to tackle is, and I'm going to bring up an expression that a mentor of mine has used often, and each time kind of surprises me when he uses it, which is why live in a culture of or when you can live in a culture of and. And what do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that once you get into academia, you get this feeling of, oh, I got into this family, I got into this new reality, and now this excludes a bunch of stuff. This excludes me selling things. This excludes me being in the rat race for promotions in the corporate space, and it excludes me being part of a lot of the job hunting, etc. game, for example. And then eventually it evolves to a kind of a dislike or an aversion for these things that we just said, that everyone that's outside academia naturally goes through.
So it's a way to make for yourself a reasons why you feel this way. Like, okay, I'm in academia, so I'm living in I'm living in a lab. No, you don't live in a lab in academia, but you spend. Some people have a couch, but
Andrew Huberman from the the Huberman Lab podcast said in an interview with Rick Rubin that he, when he moved labs, lived for a long time in his lab. So some people do live in their labs.
yes, so you almost live in a lab, and you are in this. You spend your day to do experiments. You are with your friends who are also PhD candidate, master candidates, postdocs. Your professor is there. You have a stipend, which is pretty low, more or less, depending on where you're doing your PhD, but it's low. And
You're not putting money aside for your home or for your retirement at that point.
yeah, exactly. And these days is very difficult. So um, and finally, you've never seen the end of this PhD, and even if you see the end of this PhD, it's not totally the end. So finally, you are in a. I don't like to say that this is the ivory tower, but in the context of cognitive dissonance, it's a little bit like that. So you have walls, and you don't want to see. You don't want to see what's going on outside, and you make your reasons. So outside they are like this, we are like that. Yeah.
You said you don't want to, and also I feel that you are also kind of invited to not think about these things. You are invited to give your heart and soul to academia and to the academic exercise. Uh, Not, of course, I'm generalizing, but as a culture, the academic culture tends to do that. You have to spend all your precious seconds of your day thinking about this project and thinking about becoming a professor and having a lab eventually, etc., from day one. And that's actually the challenge is the goal is quite distant from especially when you start your PhD. It can be 3 years if you're in the UK. It's not so easy that you can project yourself to the after because you're focused, super hyper focused in the now, in this tunnel vision of getting these results, writing up these articles, and getting this thesis.
Yeah, and do you see that the others, the context of academia, the lab, nurture this kind of feeling? And is it a group problem or is it individual problem? Like,
I no, I think it's a historical problem. It comes from behind, and it's a culture and a group problem. So if you're listening and or watching now, and you're struggling and stressing and having anxiety about your professional future in the PhD, it's not you. I am telling you right now, it's not you. Most of us who went through graduate school, especially through the PhD, went through some kind of bring the ring to Mordor and come back alive, type thing. It's a difficult process. It's a challenge to all of us, and that's why mental health issue numbers are high in graduate students, and I think in academia in general. Then the other thing is there's a reason also why there's pressure in the system to work like this. It's because funding, as Gad, is limited. It's kind of a competition to get the funding that exists, and then there is a system of weeding out of part of the pool of people that are in the system, and then that trickles down to, of course, graduate students in a way. I don't know if you have a comment on that, but that's one way I would answer your question.
Yeah, pressure puts a lot of things into that system where, well, publish or perish. It's still there. Where even if the things have changed a little bit these years, but it's still there mainly. The pressure of grants. There's less and less grants, more and more PhDs and PhD candidates. Let's say the labs are bigger. Than 10 years or 20 years before. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure and anxiety with this. But David, how do you think we should solve the problem? Because cognitive dissonance, we're not expert, but at the end of the day, you have a resolution of that. So,
well, hopefully you do, and you try to have a resolution early on. One moment, just to go back a little bit, one moment where you can feel this cognitive dissonance, and it's a typical story of people in graduate school, is the Christmas or whatever holiday season family supper, and then Uncle X asks you, "So, still in school? And you're doing your PhD. When do you get? When
no,
are you
yeah.
getting a real job?"
Oh
And
my
then
God.
you know this, right? You probably went through it.
Yeah. Oh my God. What are you doing these days? Can you tell me more about
Yeah,
it? Can you
when are
explain?
you the one that kills you is, so when are you going to be done with this and starting actually working? That's a classic. But yes, there is a way to take care of this and to not suffer from it too much. And this is more and more difficult the earlier and earlier you are in your PhD. That being said, some people I've met are in their first year PhD and already forward thinkers. But what happens is that you have to be conscious that when you start a PhD, somehow you can get this feeling that time has stopped. So my cousin is now applying for jobs and having to interview, and then probably having to sell something or sell his time. I'm now in academia. I entered this bubble where time doesn't move at the same speed, right? Where and now I'm going to spend infinite time. And I'm saying the feeling is it's not infinite. It's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, but it feels like now I have unlimited time to do this academic thing. The real thing is, once that timer stops for you in terms of how you feel, there's another one that starts immediately at that time, and it's the timer of when you are going to defend your thesis. Once you start the process, unless you leave the PhD, which happens and is normal and is okay depending on your situation. Once you start, the ticker starts counting of, okay, 3 years from now you're going to be depositing a thesis and defending it, and then you'll be ejected out of the graduate school experience into academia, hopefully. And for a few of you, maybe 20% of you can do that, but for 80% it's not going to be in academia. So the first exercise is to stop thinking, when you're thinking of your career and life project or professional life project, start right away thinking the PhD is a chapter in my book that's going to have this many chapters. So one day I need to close this chapter and start a first one. And I don't want to have a blank page syndrome when I start chapter 3, let's say, of my life. I want to be ready. So yes, I'm doing a PhD, but the arc of my life is larger than that, and I need to stay cognizant of it and start investing in preparing on that side of things.
Exactly. So the project is not your life. You are. It's not yourself. It's the project. Like, and the project has a beginning and has a end. And finally, is it really your project? I don't want to go there, but finally, is it your professor's project? Finally, it's not yours. The professor is only the person that will continue the project, except if you become a professor. You're not your project, your PhD project, and finally, you're doing a PhD, but this is a way to see the PhD project is a reasons why to get skilled. So it's a reasons why to get through the process of research and science.
It's a trampoline for something that comes after, be it in academia or not.
Yeah. So so at the end of the day, PhD, it's an opportunity to develop skills. I'm seeing that very positively, not negatively, where I have a big burden to finish. So it's a way to get skilled in a certain way. And yeah, it's an opportunity for yourself to develop your skill and finally close the section of the book and move forward to another section of the book.
There's another aspect of cognitive dissonance in terms of your professional career as an academic that I kind of touched upon when I said talking about this family dinner where you're talking with your uncle. But if you look back to your parents, if they are not in academia, what you're doing now doesn't resemble anything they've done professionally. And that's another source of cognitive dissonance and of you can't have real conversation and comparison of my journey with your journey. It's tough to explain what you're doing, and it's tough to explain what professional progress you're going to have afterwards because we even people who are outside academia now don't have professional tracks that are the same as our parents had in the 70s and 80s. That's another aspect of cognitive dissonance, but I think there's also a way to tackle that. So once I'm at the end of this process, I'm closing this chapter. If I've prepared, and I can talk about that a little bit, and you can talk about that a little bit, because Second Lab is exactly all about preparing beforehand. There's ways. There's an exercise that would help in not being so anxious and not thinking, oh, if I don't hit this target, I'm going to be failing at everything, and that's one of the sources of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. So you've said, like, for summarize well, said that okay, we have to open a little bit the window to see what's going on outside. And do you have other tricks, like other kind of solution paths do you see?
One thing to do is to resist temptation to tunnel vision into your project. And what I mean is, if there are seminars, meetings that are interdisciplinary or interdepartment, go to them. Network with the people, the academic people, with peers or PIs, etc. Interact with something a little bit out of your own project's domain of study. That's the first step. So academically, then the thing that I think is really, really powerful today is create a profile for yourself on LinkedIn that may not be perfect, but that will be there and that you'll grow and improve, and start seeing what are people with who maybe alumni from where I am doing my PhD. Where are they now in society? And of course, not everyone's on LinkedIn, but I think the sample is quite quite large and representative. So and the common aspect to these both these things is building relationships with people that widen your network a little bit more each month, each quarter, etc. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. So there's multiple way to think about it. Before reaching the people, okay, reaching the people is one way. Like it's very important. Networking is very important. I know that it could be very frightening in the beginning. So you start with people that you know, or you can contact an old friend or somebody who were you were with them in the in high school. Could be something starting from that. But there's another way to think about it, is see the project differently, more in terms of there's a reasons why your project was funded as a PhD. The reasons why is because your project is important as a long-term purpose. But what if so you solve the problems, you solve the typical problems, but not don't see that only from the science perspective, but from let's say market perspective. So you solve a problem. Okay, what kind of area are you? If you work in I don't know, in biology or cell culture or things like that. If you can work in engineering, in microelectronics, you can work in social science, let's say psychology of a typical populations. So you solve a problem. Have you ever meet the people, or have you ever know more about the sector that you would like to change? So if it's cell culture, do you know the biotech company in your area? There's a lot in Montreal, for example. If it's a psychology of typical type of population, have you ever met this population? Is there other organization that work with this problem? Maybe reach out to them. So reach out to the people with your project, but from another perspective. That could be something like that.
Another great way to widen the net, for sure. Sylvie Lemieux, who's watching us, is saying create a portfolio. That's also very important. Today, a lot of people are actually people in graduate school, in research departments, are starting to actually leverage their own research or an aspect of their research interest on social media, for example. LinkedIn is another place where people do it too in a different way. But yeah, creating a portfolio, having something that can trace that people can trace back to read your work, or to read your production, your content production, whichever it is. If it's not written, it could be on another support. That's exactly true.
Oh yeah, it's true. Like how do you popularize your PhD project? There's more and more and more, and exploding these days. Like what kind of contest you can participate to? Think your project in another perspective, to pitch it in 3 minutes. So there's a lot of contest about it.
Yeah, and it's always spring, summer that they're coming. These years, contexts are
Yeah,
already
it's
announced.
coming these years. So scientific communications, it's a good way to network and talk about your project in another way than a typical scientific publications or typical oral publications. It's another way. So there's some ways to see the things in another perspective. Yeah.
One thing one image that I like, and again, I mentioned Lord of the Rings before. Now I'm going to go to Marvel, but one thing an image that I like to share is the multiverse. So, when you start your PhD, there's no way to know where you're going to land 3, 4, 5 years after. Not exactly, or it's very rare. Maybe someone who already comes with the great work from their masters, and they're really lined up to do something, but it's quite rare. So I think the other exercise that might help you solve some of the cognitive dissonance and to get rid of some of the anxiety is to a friend who has been on the show, Fiona Robinson, said in her time she was job posting, scrapbooking, if it makes sense to you. She was not looking for a job, but she was collecting as she was going through her professional journey. She was collecting job postings or parts of job postings that she really liked, and that kind of built the multiverse of where she might be happy professionally in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And as a graduate student and as a young researcher, and this again, I want to say this, maybe it might be in academia, it doesn't have to be outside of academia. The same way as with your when you're investing your money, you should diversify, because if you're putting all the eggs in one basket, it might be dangerous for you. So why not play with the idea of, okay, I really want to be a professor and have my lab, but let's see what people like me are doing and what could be a great alternate reality for me if that doesn't pan out. I think that's a simple one that you can do little by little as kind of a hobby, and that can help you a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a good exercise for that at the second lab, like, and we deliver it. The last time we delivered it was I remember in October, November. I participate to one day a career event, and the first exercise we gave is just like, tell me what would be your perfect day in 5 years, and you have 1 hour. And we are there to support you to go through that process of designing your perfect day in 1 year, in 5 years. So that was funny, that was cool, and everybody was good for that. So
Yeah, and if you're able to detach from all the emotion of now, because there's a lot of emotion that you can be attached to of what you're doing now, that you can be very involved with it, and it can be difficult to take a step back. If you're able to do that and project to after you get your degree, that's gonna be very, very helpful. It's a great exercise.
yeah, do you see other stuff, or
Right now, this is really the key to me is when you get into academia and into graduate school, there is this shift in the way time passes, in the way money flows into your account and out of your account. It's a different setting than the non-academic world, but the non-academic world keeps moving forward at a certain pace, at a more, let's say, accelerated pace, from a certain point of view. And I think if you keep an eye out, if at the middle of your PhD start pacing and then jogging, and then and I'm giving a metaphor for preparing for different possibilities at the end of your PhD, then you won't stumble when you're ejected after you get your degree, ejected from graduate school and into the job market, which academia is a job market too, it in a fast-paced one that and with a lot of competition. If you have started jogging and doing some of these exercises of enriching and nurturing your networking, but also widening your vision of what you could be fulfilled doing, the transition is going to be much smoother. You're going to be able to jump onto this fast going train without stumbling, and instead of having a full year of recalibrating and finding your bearings, in a few months you might already have that first job, which, by the way, will be the first of a chain of jobs, because that's how things are now. So that would be my kind of last metaphor to kind of sum everything up.
okay, I think it's time to wrap up. So cognitive dissonance. So there's multiple way to solve that kind of problems, and finally, it's open your perspective um, in different ways. We've talked about like networking. We've talked about like thinking further your PhD, and also connecting with different kind of people, starting small, but step by step, and not just seeing the project itself as yourself, but seeing the project as something that you have to do, and it starts from the beginning, and there will be an end to that.
and listen to your spider sense, because cognitive dissonance, you get this weird feeling when it happens, and be attuned to it and see, oh, okay, there's a dissonance here. Is it a healthy one that just wants me to change my way of doing, or is it one that's a little bit bigger and I need to really manage it and find why I'm having it? And for that, it helps talking with people around you, be it your peers or your support system. If it gets too crippling, let's say in anxiety, don't forget, if you're in university, that you have the mental health services there, if you depending on your program. But I think it's quite normal to have access to those services. Don't hesitate to use them. That would be my last thing to say.
Yeah, perfectly. So I think this is the end of our episode.
This was great.
That was cool.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, very different. And thank you, David. So
thank you, Sylvie, for being in the audience. If you have a story about cognitive dissonance, if you're going through it, do write to dissonance@papaphd.com, and I'll see if I can share it, if I can give you a shout out. But it would be great to have some community stories to share with all of you, so everyone finds and understands that, it's not just me going through this. It's a human and common experience. And the good thing is that we are a great community, and there's a lot of help out there, and goodwill, and people like Gad, like me, with whom you can talk and discuss.
So thank you, everyone, for this PhD Dojo, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. If you liked this episode of the PhD Dojo, go to papaphd.com/subscribe and follow the show on your favorite listening platform. And if you have a question that you'd like us to cover on the show, simply write to dojo@papaphd.com. It'll be a pleasure to answer your questions on the show. Thanks again, happy listening, and happy sharing.